Summer split is in the books, and we have a new champion. NRG, LCS champions. No one saw it coming. Episode 138 of CFP with Blue Jay and JNT 250. We got a lot to talk about. Is NRG the future of North America? Is that going to change how we see things? Should Cloud9 go after Jojo, or is there any other changes Cloud9 should make? Maybe we're asking those questions a little bit too early, but maybe we're not. LCS moving out of LA, that would be really crazy. Nothing for sure yet, but just some rumors, just some discussions. And Disguised going on broadcast. There's some talks about him maybe wanted to join the LCS. We will go over all of that. If you haven't noticed, I am on a different setup this week. There may be some scuffed things going on, but JNT and I are going to power through because we need to get you guys this episode. So, Genter, let's hop into it. Finals, wild. I know you're probably a little sad, but first impressions.
Yeah, definitely still a little bit sad about Cloud9 losing. For those who don't know, I am a Cloud9 fan, obviously, but the three finals that I've been to in person, three finals where Cloud9 has been playing, and they're 0-3 in them. So I think the next time that there's a finals close to me, I better not go just for superstition's sake.
I've joined you in all of those finals. Okay, the first one we didn't go together, but we happened to be at the same one as well. Yeah, we are both 0-3 watching Cloud9. And this one's got a sting for Cloud9 fans. This one was like, this was on lock. I guess we definitely have to talk about NRG, and we definitely will. But Jinter, I gotta give you the floor here. Just if you need to rant, this is a safe space. Just give me your feelings. If anyone you got a flame, we understand your pain. Just go for it.
One thing that I thought that was pretty funny is I just finished right before this episode came out. A Degon interview with Blabber came out on Degon's YouTube channel, which happened right after the finals had happened. And it was some pretty interesting perspective to hear about Blabber talk about it, considering the fact that one, they thought that there was no chance that they were going to lose today. They thought that they were clearly going to be better than NRG. And, he also said that they perhaps underestimated them. But one of the things that was very interesting from the jump was they said apparently in their draft meeting, one of their main goals was to not let FBI get Kaisa. And
that plan went out the window.
And they gave it up first pick 2 times to NRG when they were on. I guess they gave it up once when NRG had blue side after game 2, and then they also gave it in game 3 after CNN opted to take Maokai first pick in game 3. So considering that in that interview, he said, we don't want to let FBI get Kaisa. And then they proceeded to give it over 2 times. And I think it was the game 3. Was it the game? Let me just double check to make sure I have that exactly right. It was the game 3 where FBI had like 16 or 17 kills and just was absolutely owning Cloud9 that whole game.
Yeah, and I guess FBI is a great place to start because that matchup between FBI and Berserker, I think everyone had it heavily sided towards Berserker. And if you think someone's going to get 16 kills in this series in a game, you're going to think it's going to be Berserker. And what is so amazing was the gap. And really, I realized it's not just, FBI better than Berserker. It was how the teams played around these AD carries for sure. But still, we had a gap in the bot lane. That is so wild to me. I haven't gotten over almost any of it. The whole thing is still a shock to me. I couldn't believe it when we were sitting in our seats watching it. But that is wild, and I don't think a lot of C9 fans are going to be able to forget that part.
I mean, going into the series, from what we were talking about when it came to a game plan perspective, after watching last week both Cloud9 beating NRG and then NRG beating Golden Guardians in the lower bracket to push them into the finals weekend, one of the areas I thought was going to be very important was going to be the bot lane, because NRG and FBI have pretty much their bread and butter is to isolate FBI, leave him to his own devices, and just try to farm and stay in the game until the mid game. And that's been the goal. And it was something that I outlined last week. And from the Cloud9 perspective, one thing that makes them a very good team is their bot lane dominance and their ability to get Berserker and Sven in advantageous positions, use that to then influence the rest of the map when it comes to, shifting bot lane to mid, shifting your bot lane up for Rift Herald fights and taking early dragons. And we pretty much saw the complete opposite from that out of Cloud9. And I guess NRG as well, where the whole series was just topside focused. It felt like every single game, both junglers were making a beeline to top lane after either full clearing or after going 3 camps. I think it was In 3 out of the 4 games, one of the 2 junglers was running top lane level 3 after just doing 3 camps, and I thought that was super interesting that, 1, Cloud9 decided to match those ganks as opposed to cross-mapping instead, considering the fact that we even saw in this series, Dokla and Contracts were getting a lot of successful plays going on early in the game, but Fudge was still able to maintain and not even lose gracefully because I think in a lot of those games he sort of came back and became even with Dokla despite getting pressured very heavily early into the game. And instead of Cloud9 deciding to cross map, they for the most part just decided to match the plays. And I think it just allowed FBI to do whatever he wanted. And like I said last week, when you let FBI do whatever he wants for the first 15, 20 minutes of the game, it usually puts NRG in a really good spot, setting them up for team fights and whatnot.
Yeah, and I want to get back to the top lane. You mentioned how we were a little bit surprised to see how often junglers were going top lane. Top lane is the other area where I fully expected Cloud9 to just have such a large edge, like Fudge over Dokla. I'm taking Fudge 10 out of 10 times. But guess what? Dokla surprised all of us and actually had a really good series. It was really funny in the post game interview. He mentioned, like, yeah, the game plan. I think he's joking, but he said the game plan is to convince everyone that we don't play Jax. And yeah, we actually do play Jax. And then he styled on it. He absolutely styled on it. We talked about NRG being able to shut down Berserker, who's supposed to be C9's, I don't know, ace up their sleeve. A big part of shutting him down was the Jax just constantly hovering on top of Berserker, especially the Xayah game. He could not get away from the Jax anytime C9 went for an engage. Dokla was there to jump on top of Xayah, make his life a living hell. She's trying to kill him. He hits Sonya's, gets another counter strike off. Really, like, perfect gameplay out of Dokla and exactly what you want out of the Jax pick. I I cannot believe my expectations for him and how different he played based off my expectations. Like, I gotta call myself out here. I fully expected Fudge to just dump on him, and I was wrong.
I I mean, I think I would still argue that Fudge had the upper hand in the 1v1 for the most part. I think even in 2 separate occasions in 2 of the 4 games where Fudge was set behind early from a gank from Contracts, but yet Fudge was still able to get a solo kill or get a kill returned onto Dokla. So, but I definitely don't disagree that, Dokla played very, very, very well and was a major part of NRG winning. But I think um, the path to victory for them, I think, was a great game plan for NRG, where they wanted to make an early play on top side, get Dokla a little bit ahead, and then use that lead to transition it to the rest of the map. Because we saw both in this series and in the series on Saturday with Team Liquid, whenever Dokla got even like the smallest bit of a lead, he was instantly trying to use that advantage, especially his level 6 power spikes on Rumble in the game one. He played a bunch of Rumble in series against Team Liquid, but even on the Jax, just roaming and giving NRG the numbers advantage and, punishing Cloud9 for going for a lot of these fights that we've seen them do pretty much the entire year, where they don't really care if they're in an equal number situation or even a member down. If they feel that they can win the fight, Cloud9 is going to take the fight, but NRG kind of had this ace up their sleeve where they would just sack a wave, and Doke would be like, I'm going to sack this wave. I'm going to come down to this dragon fight. And guess what? They're probably not going to expect, this extra man that we have. And I feel like we saw that in almost every single game across the entire weekend for NRG, whether it was this series on Sunday or the previous one on Saturday. Dokla was just trying to be as impactful as possible. And yes, I think that did sort of allow Fudge to get back into these games, but NRG clearly identified the weaknesses of Cloud9 in terms of the aggression that they like to pursue when they don't necessarily have the numbers advantage, or they try to hand stiff you. I feel like that's the phrase that people use a lot when it comes to Cloud9, and even they themselves say it. They feel like they play better mechanically, and their better mechanics can lead them to victories in equal or disadvantaged situations. But NRG was like, nope, we're just going to bring the extra man and make it as simple as possible. And it felt like Cloud9 was just kind of playing right into the hands of NRG for the majority of the series in the early game.
I love that you point out the how much Dokla was roaming, and like you said, over the weekend, it wasn't just one series; it was both. And to me, that kind of explains the CSD differentials in the top lane, like why he's not just hard smashing after he gets a successful gank from his top laner. It's because they do put those resources somewhere else, even on the plays where Dokla isn't involved, but they want to have Palafox roam bot or TP bot. In the one case, there was a really nice TP flank, I think it was on Nico. You had Dokla cover mid. So, like, you could tell that this team knows how to rotate their top laner and to use him other ways, even if he's not involved in the play. And yeah, I just I feel like it's something that's said so often that with many top laners or many players in general that like, hey, sometimes you don't see it on the scoreline that this guy sacrificed a wave to help out the team, and like we all acknowledge that that's a thing, and then we just completely forget it when we look at their stats at the end of the season. This is one where it's really important to remember just how valuable Dokla was in, yeah, just rotating and helping out his team any way he could, instead of just being selfish and taking the large CS lead.
But I would say in the same breath from the Cloud9 side of top lane, I didn't like their game plan at all whatsoever. You know, I talked about how top lane was going to be a very good matchup for Cloud9, and I had all the faith in the world that Fudge was going to be able to take it to Dokla in the 1v1. And I think even in the instances where they were 1v1ing in the game one, where Fudge and Dokla is actually ahead of Fudge, but on, I think it was like level 7, level 8, Fudge solo killed him in the top lane after he rushed Mom Malmortius or something. But apart from the first game, after in games 2 and 3, Cloud9 just opted to not put any focus into the top side from, the pick and ban perspective. Like they kind of just said like, yeah, we'll let Dokla pick whatever he wants, and we're just gonna play we're just gonna play whatever into it. It just felt like Cloud9 didn't prioritize top lane whatsoever. And
Perhaps disrespected top lane.
I mean, I would argue. I forget which game it was. I think it was the game 4 where, or no,
I
maybe.
can't even flame them for disrespecting top lane though, because we disrespected top lane.
Well, I mean, but I remember sitting there in the game 3 when like Dokla blind picked the Jax and C9 picked Aatrox into it. I was like, dude, that is like disrespectful as fuck. You like,
You did say that.
I remember telling this
Yep.
to you. It's like that is like super disrespectful to just pick yourself into a counter matchup and just think that you're gonna vibe. And
Well, the
once
Jax
again,
solo killed them too, right? If I remember right,
exactly.
didn't he?
There was
Yeah.
Contracts ganked him early on, blew the Aatrox flash, and then Dokla solo killed him right after that, and then killed him again when Contracts reganked with top after it was like post level 6. And I just thought it was, especially on the top side of the map, it was just big disrespect out of Cloud9. And I think in real time, when they noticed that NRG was really prioritizing the top side, they kind of did the reactionary play of matching instead of cross mapping. And I think NRG did it. Like I said, all the credit in the world deserves to go to NRG for the game plan, because I think the game plan was exactly what they needed to do. They needed to not have top lane loose, so they put an emphasis of Contracts ganking top lane to make Dokla, basically make him a factor, try to not have him be like 0-4, 0-5 games that we've seen Dokla and NRG have throughout the entire year. There have been times where NRG was winning in spite of Dokla, where he'd be playing weak side champion and he'd be 0-5, 0-6. Yeah, they still get the win because, sometimes teams are over prioritizing that, but Cloud9 feels like they didn't put any focus into it at all. And I think ultimately it was their downfall. If I had to pick anything in particular, yeah, we'll get to M&S. But I
I was
think
just about to ask you about M&S.
I think in terms of how Cloud9 played the game as opposed to the gameplay itself, the problem started with whatever they were doing on the top side.
Totally fair. Okay, but let's get. I don't mean to dig, but we got to get into it. Talk to me about M&S. Come on.
He played awful. Like it was just it was awful. And you want to talk about disrespect? I feel like game 1 was the prime example of that, where M&S on 2 separate occasions is just disrespecting the hell out of NRG, walking up into lane with less than 200 HP, getting his flash blown, then reapproaching the lane and just dying. But it was the game 1 Jace. Despite them winning, I still thought M&S played bad. The RE was awful. Everybody saw it. Captain Flowers pointed it out many a time where he could not hit a skill shot to save his life.
Yeah,
And
that was,
then
dude. They were flaming him real hard
he
with the charms.
completely threw away his entire lead and Cloud9's entire lead on the Own in game 4. The exact if I had to select one moment where I think M&S really messed up and really was his biggest mistake, was when he was 4-0 on the Yone and he was hiding behind the red buff wall, where he then uses his E to go out and skirmish NRG to try to push them back as Cloud9's running away. Once he snaps back from the E, he instantly then ults over to try to solo kill Palafox, ulting himself into 4 NRG members, gives away a shutdown, and pretty much just ruined the entire momentum of that game. And you could see after that where M&S was continuously making mistakes in the side lane, uh, just playing badly. I don't know. It was just all around bad from M&S. And even the Annie in game 2. I mean, again, you were sitting next to me. That last pick Annie when it came out, that was the worst thing I think I've ever seen. That Cloud9 game 2 draft was just absolutely disgusting. I knew that
I
they were going
think
to lose that game after the draft.
Yeah, and I think we need to hammer home a little bit more on the Yone pick, because that game, you think this is the redemption arc, right? He's like 3 or 4-0. I don't remember. He's got a huge shutdown, but he's absolutely styling on them. He makes a huge outplay bot lane where they pick up 2 kills. Meanwhile, there's also taking plates in the mid lane. Like everything is going their way. This is the dream scenario for a redemption. Not the item, but like redemption arc. And yeah, he completely throws it away, which I think for C9 fans, that's one where people are going to start to question, like, okay, is this our guy? And we still got Worlds to go, right? There's still lots of time. Like maybe he is your guy. Maybe he does show up at Worlds. And same thing with Fudge, who I would say was not, maybe not even just this series, but over the course of the split, Fudge was not the guy that we've known Fudge to be.
Well, other
I think we're
people
going to
seem
be
to not say that because he found himself on the All Pro list. Same with
sure.
M&S. Once
Yeah.
again, I'm sorry to bring it up again. How the fuck does that even happen?
We don't need to hammer that home again. But the point is, people are going to start to question this Cloud9 roster after that, which is so wild because everything going into this weekend told us that we were going to be talking about the new dynasty and how these players are going to be cementing themselves in their dynasty or whatever. And now it's like, oh my God, is this roster even going to stay together? And yes, we still got Worlds to go, but those questions are popping up, and I think for good reason because those guys did not perform.
Yeah,
I guess we
it's just
go
leaving a
ahead.
bad taste in everyone's mouth. We're kind of just gonna have to sit on this really underwhelming Cloud9 performance for the next month and a half until World starts. And in a certain aspect, I think this loss actually might benefit Cloud9 in terms of they have been sort of a cut above the rest of the LCS for the majority of the year. I outlined it a little bit in our last episode where they hadn't really necessarily propelled themselves above everybody else in the regular season, but from what we saw in the first 2 playoff matches, I think everybody had the belief that Cloud9 was looking really good, and everyone was thinking that Cloud9 was going to win the split and that they were going to be a pretty solid number 1 seed to send to the World Championships. However, that's kind of all up in the air at this point, just because of the
I
performance. And we really are going to have to sit on this, hope that Cloud9 improves. But like I said, it could be a good thing. I think a lot of their weaknesses were exposed, and I think hopefully, I've been saying this for feels like 2 to 3 years now. Like the horny C9 is the worst version of C9 when they just continually try to take fights that they should have no business in taking, add it like ultimate disadvantages or numbers disadvantages. And NRG, as another thing that I mentioned almost throughout the entire year, they like to thrive in the chaos, and they do a really good job of countering a lot of what Cloud9 likes to do. And when the game got very fast paced, especially in the mid games in these series from behind, from the Cloud9 perspective, they kind of, they fell apart. I mean, game 3 was the only game where it was still sort of back and forth and Cloud9 was in it despite being behind so much. But once the control went over to NRG in games 2 and 4, the NRG just shut them down pretty quickly.
I know you say that this could be a good thing, and I know a lot of people are going to hear that and say, "Bro, that's cope." And I don't blame people for thinking that, but that doesn't make you wrong. I do see this could we could be living in a world where this is a huge wake-up call for C9 where they thought they were way better than everybody else in North America, ourselves included and everybody else included. And they say, "Oh, maybe we're not as good as we are and we really have to turn things on." We have what, like a month or so for Worlds? A
Month
month
and a
and a bit
half, I
maybe?
think. Yeah.
Yeah, that could be a huge wake up call. And yeah, maybe it's cope, but maybe it's not. Maybe that's accurate. Or even from the side of someone that knows they really messed up, M&S, Fudge, maybe they realize like I might be playing for my spot now at this Worlds. Like if I have a really poor performance at Worlds, and Cloud9 has never been shy about going for a new player, right? Like a lot of people would have thought they would have never let Impact go. A lot of people would have thought they would never let Licorice go. They're not afraid to let good guys go if they find somebody else that they think can be better. And so I hope that these players that have replaced others, like MNS who replaced Jensen, like Fudge who replaced Licorice, realize that they're no special. They're no more special than any of those other players that were replaced. And Worlds could be the time where they have to prove to themselves that they belong on this team. Um, with that said, the whole C9 Jojo discussion has started a little bit. We saw it on Reddit, which yeah, it's Reddit, but that doesn't mean that it's just fugazi fake news, nothing to see here. You have to wonder if C9 does look for a guy like Jojo because one, he's MVP, two, he probably wants to play on a team that can win. And it doesn't seem like EG's that team if they're to gone full budget. We don't know if EG's even going to be in the league, et cetera, et cetera. I think we could see a world where Cloud9 says, hey, the best mid laner in the league is available. Let's go after him. And he probably wants to come to our team because we win a fucking lot. What do you think about that? Am I too far ahead of myself? Or is this a possibility in your eyes?
Well, it's just funny because we had, before this even became a topic that seemed to be talked about quite a lot post finals, we had a bit of a mini discussion in our Discord about this where people were posing the idea of, is there a chance that C9 should go after Jojo, considering that he ended up winning the MVP and is obviously going to be a sought after individual in the 2023-2024 offseason. And at the time, before this had happened, I guess this was in between last week and this past week's games. At the time, I was like, I don't think that C9 Jojo would ever really be a possibility. It's pretty anti Cloud9 for them to go after a big free agent signing, especially in the solo lanes. And I just thought that MNS still deserved the chance to prove himself at both the finals weekend and at the World Championship. I think he still has that opportunity at the World Championship to,
For sure.
with a decent to good performance. I mean, he basically just has to not run it. Hard to say. He's got to have a good performance against some of the other Eastern mid laners, and I think he's capable of doing that. But I think, like I said, this 1.5 months of sitting on this loss for Cloud9 and MNS, I think is really going to be make or break in terms of if he can turn it around and be maybe the mid laner of the future for Cloud9. Because when we have seen, Cloud9's success, they have been able to have consistent solo lane performers that are on the team for multiple years. It does feel like when Cloud9 has been in the various phases of their top teams, it's kind of the solo laners have been a very big staple, and other parts have been continually getting swapped in. I guess you look at the C9 of old, and it was Jensen and Sneaky; those were the main two guys, and all the other parts were sort of changing in and out. Nowadays, it seems to be Blabber and Berserker are going to be your two core pieces, and then depends on what's going around with the rest of the other roles if they're going to sort of fill those in as necessary. So I think it really depends, obviously, on his role's performance, but 1 week ago, I said it wouldn't be a possibility at all. I would say, sitting here now, it could be a possibility.
It's funny how much a weekend can change things, right? Like like you said, you thought it was impossible a week ago. Mind you, I can't say I was in the same boat, but I do think it was way less likely a week ago than it is now. But like you said, still has a chance to prove himself. Worlds is still quite a bit of ways away. He's got time to prep. And if he does have a good showing, there is more of a chance that they keep him. Something else that I think is worth throwing in that conversation real quick is that JoJo doesn't take up an import slot, right? And if
Mhm.
Cloud9 does want to make a move somewhere else, whether it be top lane support, whatever, probably not jungle AD carry, we're pretty sure that they would want to keep there. But if they do find another import that they need in a different spot, well, guess what? That's two if you have Berserker plus one more, and therefore the JoJo not taking up an import slot could be incredibly valuable. But I'm sure we'll revisit a conversation similar to this in the future, especially in the off season once that gets going. But yeah, never too early to speculate. Never too early to speculate because yeah, things move quickly. Let's just put it that way. Um, Anything else on this series? I know we're going to talk about the finals in general and numbers and stuff like that. Anything else on the games specifically?
Well, one thing, maybe not specifically about the games, but I thought that was kind of interesting. Dom put out a tweet after the finals yesterday stating that he thought that this finals was the biggest upset in LCS history. And I
Hmm.
just wanted to pose the question if you either agree or disagree with that. And if you need time to think, I'll start off by saying I disagree, but I wouldn't say that, I would say it is a very big upset. It's probably up there. I still think I would put number one as Immortals versus TSM in spring 2016 when Immortals was 17-1, I think it was, and TSM was 9-9 as the sixth seed, and they faced number one seeded Immortals, and that was the 3-0, the Huni top lane Lucian thing. I'd probably put that as number one, but this series is not too far behind that.
I disagree. I think this one is definitely the biggest. Um, I think it's important to remember that at that time, you had peak GOAT on your team. This NRG team did not have a single all pro on it. I know that's been a huge discussion. I know it's been said a million times, but like that needs to be highlighted when talking about one of the biggest upsets ever. Cloud9 obviously had Blabber, who is obviously an MVP candidate this time around. You have Berserker, who people say, even though he wasn't the MVP, is the best player in the league. I think that TSM roster having Bjergsen at the time. Now, I think it was Wild Turtle, or was it Double Lift at the
It
time?
was double if Yellow Star, but
Yeah.
I'd like to remind everyone that they weren't very good. They were 9-9. They were pretty much in a very similar situation to NRG.
Yeah, I just think the whole having 0 all pros and then coming and beating the hands down best team, I think to me this time around is the biggest upset. But it seems like we're going to have to disagree on that one.
Seems like you're short selling that Immortal season, 17-1.
I'm not short selling it. I that was a good team. That it really, really was. I'm not trying to discount that. I think you're short selling the 0 all pros.
Well, I
There
mean,
and it's
I'm just
possible that there is some recency bias here. I understand it's easy to be hyped about a match that happened not even 24 hours ago, or I guess 24 hours ago approximately. Um, I understand that, but to me, I think this was the biggest upset. But I do think it's a fair I don't know, honorable mention, I guess, for me, the
well,
Immortals one.
not to continue this discussion too much
No,
further,
please feed
but
me if you
just
got more.
just to
What you
talk
got?
about your All Pro as you mentioned, Bjergsen, third All Pro, is the only All Pro player that TSM had that split, and
Sure,
Immortals
but he's
had.
also Bjergsen.
I know that.
Okay, sorry, carry on.
The way that
Continue.
I guess one of the first points you made was like peak goat Bjergsen. I think I would also argue that like we're kind of like this is peak goat Blabber as well. So like
Yeah.
it's kind of comparable there. And also like Immortals was all first team All Pro except for Pobelter, who was number 2.
I
So
think peak goat blabber is an argument for my side of why this is a bigger upset, if you will.
well,
But
I'm
I
just
have to admit,
comparing the two.
I have to admit that I did not think at all about the Immortals one. So I am glad you bring it up, but I still disagree. I do want to continue this discussion and talk about world's numbers. Just before we do, I want to remind people that this is a weekly podcast. However, next week we probably won't have an episode. We do plan to do episodes in the future. We don't know exactly when. We will
I
have to figure that out.
would say it's pretty safe to say there's not going to be an episode next week.
Yeah, and we'll have to figure it. We'll tweet out or we'll post in our Discord when there will be another episode. So look in the description. You can find a link to our Discord. There's plenty of discussion lately in there. Shout out to all the people that have been talking a lot in our Discord. That is really cool, and we love discussing with you guys. That's cool. Anyways, this podcast is weekly, so you guys can subscribe and get used to getting weekly episodes once we get running again. For now, we don't know when that's going to be. Another thing to point out is we are on a bunch of different platforms: Spotify, Apple Podcasts. If you're looking for another podcast to listen to on your way to work, at work, we do this all the time on multiple platforms. Be sure to find us anywhere. Just look for the Clown Fiesta podcast. Now, let's get back into the discussion around this because I know we wanted to talk about viewership and things of that nature. Where do you want to start with that, Jinter? Do you want to just talk about the straight up viewership numbers and whatnot?
Yeah, there was a post on Reddit today outlining the viewership numbers from this year's Summer Finals compared to last year's Summer Finals, and it was down a whopping 40%, which is no surprise considering we have been talking about LCS viewership declining for the last 3 years. The Summer 2022 Finals was 370,000 viewers versus this Finals, which is 222,000. And while the unfortunate, part of the unfortunate reality of the situation is NRG is not a popular team. I think they definitely gained a lot of fans after this finals weekend, and I think that NRG games will probably become, or I shouldn't say probably become. They have the potential to become a high viewership team and a team that is very interesting and one that a lot of people want to watch and are interesting to watch, and therefore will have higher viewership. But I think before this weekend, it's not very surprising to see that NRG, the low viewership numbers with a team like NRG being in the finals, just because it's not your TSM, your Team Liquid, your 100 Thieves, maybe your FlyQuest in this instance, just in terms of the roster that they had this year.
Yeah, and while we can acknowledge that NRG isn't one of those top teams, I will say that it does feel to me like NRG is a lot of people's second favorite teams. Whereas like it's the NA story, right? You have the 3 NA players of like Dokla, Contracts, and Palafox that have long time not been able to even make it here. And then not only do they make it, they have a huge upset. Like that's a story that I think a lot of people were able to rally behind, the people that did watch. But I think it's fair to point out that, like, well, it's been a long time since NRG/CLG has been a relevant team as far as like fandom goes, and that is a part of it. However, I think we absolutely have to point out, and I saw someone comment this on Reddit, so shout out to whoever made that comment. A big part of it is a lot of people lost interest without being able to watch, seeing as the games were during the week the whole year round. And yes, viewership has been falling off year over year, but this is a steep drop off in viewership, right? So like to me, I think it's very important to point out that yeah, when people aren't able to keep up with the product and follow the storylines, et cetera, I'm not surprised at all that viewership fell off a cliff. And it makes me wonder what the hell they're going to do to stem the bleeding and, well, just make changes. What are they going to do? They got to
Yeah,
do something.
it's difficult because while this has sort of been something that's compounding with the decline in viewership, this is obviously a little bit of an asterisk season in terms of the delayed start due to the negotiations between Riot and the NACL. There was a 2 week delay. There was also then the shift in schedule from the weekends to the weekdays, and then because of the delay, they had to introduce a shortened season, which was all super weeks. So then there was 3 days of gameplay per week on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, which I know for myself was pretty difficult to watch just for the most part in terms of keeping up with every single thing, and ensuring that we're able to do this and we feel prepared and knowledgeable to talk about all this stuff because I think, and I've said this before, after they got rid of when they did it in 2021, where they did the full 45 game full season, 3 days of full gameplay every single day, that's a lot. And I think in this case, it's too much. I think the sweet spot is 2 days a week. And hopefully we are going to get we are going to go back to that. But in terms of the weekends versus weekdays, that's just going to be a problem no matter what.
Uh, So maybe not no matter what. And admittedly, I'm jumping ahead here because we were going to talk about this in quick news, but I think it's relevant to bring up now. Is the rumor that Monte Cristo was talking about on his podcast that the LCS might be looking to move out of LA. Now, he did make sure to say that nothing has been confirmed yet, just that he knows that they're discussing it, which makes me wonder if they're trying to explore ways to get this product back on the weekends. That's my hope. When I heard him say that, my hope is they're going, oh, we really fudged up here. We do realize that we can't have Valorant and League on weekends. What can we do to get this product back on the weekend so that people can consume the LCS again? And that's what I wondered when I heard that. How likely or possible it is that they can move the LCS out of LA, I don't know. It's been a discussion for a long time. Far before this year, it just seems like we're more in like crisis situation where something needs to change. Why that conversation has become so much more relevant now.
Yeah, I mean, with the introduction of VCT and them using the same studio, it was never going to be a situation where they were going to be able to play on the same days. So if they were to move out of LA, I would hope that that would also mean a shift back to the weekends. So I presume that if they're moving it, they would then have a new sort of Riot space for those games to take place. Who knows? Maybe it could be something that became fully remote, or not necessarily fully remote, but teams are playing from a remote location on a server that's very has very close proximity. Like if, for example, if there was a Tournament Realm server on the East Coast that everybody played from in the same city, you could maybe still be at a remote location, but you still be playing on a server at that location, therefore we'll be playing on low ping. But
Yeah.
if it's I feel like uprooting the LCS out of LA, regardless of where you go, opens a big can of worms in terms of everything that goes into that.
Absolutely. So much more easier said than done. And from everything we've heard from past commissioners and from John Needham and Naz, I can't remember her last name, but all the Riot people, from what it sounds like, they have not given up on esports whatsoever, and they do truly believe in it. However, it's going to take a significant investment, I'm sure. I don't have the exact number, but a significant investment for sure to figure out, hey, are we just going to move this thing to New York, Chicago, somewhere in Texas, whatever, wherever it is? Like you said, big can of worms because there's probably a lot that comes with that. But if they are true to their word, which I mean, I won't blame you if you say XD to that, but if they are true to their word that they believe in esports and they believe they can grow it again, maybe they do think it's worth the massive resource investment to move the LCS. I'm not holding my breath, but I do think it's possible, which would really, really be something.
I think the last thing that we were going to talk about when it came to the finals, um, the finals, is that Dash tweeted out before the finals weekend, said one last time, heavily indicating that this is likely going to be the last time that we ever see Dash hosting the desk for the LCS, which is kind of sad just
That's
because
just
one,
devastating, honestly.
yeah, it's sad because one, we didn't have him the entire summer split, and I feel like a lot of people could feel the effects of that. Not to say that the analyst desk and how it was ran and hosted was terrible by any means. It just didn't. It felt awkward. I feel like a lot of people had that sentiment in the first couple weeks where it felt very very awkward. I think all of Mark Z, Jat, Emily Rand, and Raz got better at it throughout the split, and I think that they sort of figured out how they wanted to do it, and the feel of it became a lot more felt like easier going and comfortable because it did feel a little bit awkward at the start, but you could see how seamless it was for Das to just come in and be the host of the finals weekend, and it was like he never left, like it was hand in glove. So to see that we got teased one last time kind of sucks, but good
The
for him
reason
that
it
he was
was
at least there and
Yes, that's
hosting.
true. And the reason for me why it was so devastating that we heard that because I guess maybe I just never fully accepted. Like, I, honestly, I really did think he would be coming back next year. I think I even said it to you before that tweet or like sometime this weekend. I said to you like I
Yeah,
think Dash will be back next year.
you
I think he'll
did.
probably take a pay cut or something because I think the LCS will realize like, hey, this guy was a really good host. We can use someone like him because I think you're right. I do think the in between games were a little bit awkward. Yes, the broadcast team did improve as the year went on, but I don't think they were ever expected to or ever going to reach the level of hosting that you had with Dash. So I thought, maybe naively, but I thought we would get him back next year and everything would go back to normal. Doesn't seem like that's going to be the case. And so that to me was really like, oh my God, just devastating.
Makes me wonder if they're going to spend this part of the off season looking for a new dedicated full-time host, or if they continue with the same system that they ran in summer of sort of the rotating host duties between your Mark Z, Raz, Emily Rand, and Jet.
Yeah, I'm
Just
curious of that myself.
whether or not they bring somebody from the outside in to be the full-time host, or one of those four becomes the full-time host, or they leave it the same. I see it as those three options.
Yeah.
Should we
Yeah.
move over to the Saturday series of TL versus NRG?
Let's do that. Before we do that, I just want to remind people again to subscribe, hit the like button, and leave a comment. You guys have been so fantastic doing that for us. Please continue to do that. And big shout out to all of you that have been doing that. It's helped us tremendously. Let's talk about this series. This one was also a shock. Maybe not as much of a shock as the finals was, but this series was a shock. I think most people had TL as the favorites, and it was a banger. Uh, it is a little bit weird that TL took them to 5 games and Cloud9 didn't, but still definitely a really interesting series.
Yeah, I feel like for this one we should start with the elephant in the room,
Which
because
one?
well, I was gonna say I think the both of us have been, I wouldn't say skeptical, but I think both of us have maybe wanted to slow down the core JJ hate train in terms of it seems like the backlash he's been getting over the past year in terms of this guy shouldn't be viewed as what he like. When are we going to start talking about core JJ and how bad he's become? And I think that it's a little bit aggressive to say that he's become bad, but he was definitely bad in this series.
You talk about the hate train. What should I say? How should I put this? All aboard, maybe. Dude, this is not the core JJ we've come to know. Not at all. And yeah, he was bad. I'll just say it. He was really bad. I went and counted his deaths. Now I'm having trouble remembering. It was either 18 or 19 or something like that over the 5 games. That is a lot of deaths, a lot. And look, I understand. Oh, high death number must be bad. I realize that's not how you should look at a game. That is a lot of deaths, guys. For a best of five, just for to compare to Ignar had like 7 over the course of the whole 5 game series. And this was a series that was back and forth, right? It went 5 games, back and forth series. There shouldn't be a guy dying that much, and his engages were absolutely terrible. Um, a lot of the times I have no world, or I can't see in which world he sees that there's an engage angle where he's going for some of these fights. And obviously, no one can follow up because his teammates don't see it either. So he's just inting. And I don't know how else to, I don't know what else to say.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, Team Liquid was playing 4v5 for a few of the games. I think it was well, obviously it was game one. Core JJ was like half of the team's deaths by the end of it. And I think it was game three where Core JJ was on the rel. But for the most part, in those two games, Team Liquid was literally playing a 4v5 for that entire game. Core JJ was constantly either getting picked off or engaging without the backup of his team on multiple occasions. And I really felt like, especially in those in that game one and that game three, Core JJ was really hurting the team. I think both of those games were very, very winnable games from the Team Liquid perspective, especially because of how hard Summit was winning in the top side. I think when we talked, we kind of thought going into this weekend, we were looking at Dokla as this guy who was going to get abused by both Summit and Fudge, and I think that was not. I don't think he got abused in this series, but I think that Summit definitely in the first four games was playing, very, very well. I think he
Game
was.
two, or maybe it was three, whichever one the Gwen won. What was the Gwen game?
Game two was the Gwen game.
That was a game where I could say Summit definitely got the better of Dokla. I think it was that one. But to your point, yeah, it wasn't like Dokla just got absolutely shit on the whole series, but you still got to give credit to Summit for completely taking over that game in specific.
Mhm.
Like that was a game where you definitely like Summit +1. And you need your guys that you rely on to be like that. Unfortunately, uh, not enough, I guess. And that's not even a shade to him, but like it just wasn't enough to carry the team because there were multiple issues across the whole series from them. You could point to so APA. I got to give full credit for. I mean, his Nico was really, really good at finding fights. That's the way we've seen his Nico pretty much all of playoffs. At the same time, you have to acknowledge that Palafox is kind of getting a free lane in most of those matchups. I which one was it where maybe he was playing Tristana? The one game Palafox is perma prio mid. He's roaming
It
and
was
helping
almost every
contracts.
single game. Palafox
Well,
Palafox was up
the
in
one
CS and had
game
prio in every single game.
that's probably true. The one game that stuck out to me is where they go and they invade and they take blue buff. Contracts gets blue buff as Maokai, and then they run over and take Scuttle on the other side. Like Perma Prio mid allowed them to get so much more than just CSD mid. Palafox is helping his jungle get way far ahead. And I'll have to remind people that like Piosik is a good jungler. And if you put him behind, that's a really, really big I don't know, +1 in the win column, I guess. Like getting contracts ahead of Piosik is a big part of stopping TL from taking over games.
Yeah, I think we just talked about Core JJ in terms of his poor performance, and I think he was the most egregious one, and it was very obvious that he was underperforming. And when it comes to APA, I think his impact in team fights was really good. He was finding those multi-man Nico ults, but I think he was in terms of his performance, I think it flew under the radar a bit. I think in terms of how poor he played overall. I think if you want to look at his like game impact in sort of like a bit of a graph kind of format, you had the laning phase where he was at sort of some baseline level and it was just going down and down and down as the lane phase would continue. He would make a nice multi-man play, would sort of spike back up because TL would get, some advantage from that, but he really wasn't able to do a single thing outside of, his team fighting with Nico. He was getting shit on in lane by Palafox the entire game. Even in a couple of times when he was playing the Nico, he flubbed a couple engages, but also credit Palafox specifically in that Tristana game. I think 3 separate occasions he ulted him back with the Buster Shot to prevent APA from getting on them. And then his game 5 Xerath, while I think it was good for about a 10-minute stretch of him hitting those ults, he, when he wasn't, those were the only ults that he was hitting the whole game, basically. And
Yeah, he did start to whiff a lot. And unfortunately, when it comes to Xerath, hitting and missing your ultimate is kind of the difference between a good and a bad Xerath. So I know it sounds very three head to be like, oh, he missed ulti, but you know what he did? Like in the really
But I mean,
important late game
his
team fight.
positioning was also bad. Like there was a couple occasions
Yes.
where he blew his flash in a situation where you shouldn't blow your flash, and then well, specifically the one that really put this whole thing in motion was when he got ganked mid. I think it was Ignar came out from the side, hex flashing, and Palafox shuffled him back. APA flashed after the fact of getting shuffled and then died. and then he died another time after that, and it really put TL on the back foot for that game. That was then before APA started hitting all those skill shots, but then you saw his effectiveness just completely get erased when he wasn't able to hit FBI with the chain ults. Because apart from that, APA did not play well either. But I just don't think it was as obvious as Core JJ.
Now, to me, I like, yes, I have some criticism for APA as I just laid out, but to me, I think TL should still be more than happy with what they got from him. Reason being, there's some really important things to point out here. One of them is, um, he doesn't freaking speak the same goddamn language as his teammates, and I know this has been talked about before, but guys, this guy is playing a champion where you're the engage for your team and you're trying to flank pretty much permanently. Now, imagine trying to do that while being on the same page as guys that don't speak your language. Like, I understand Core JJ and Jan can understand, but like, you're not speaking the same language as Summit and Pyosik, like, not nearly at all. And I feel like that has to be so hard to do. And he still managed to pull off so many nice wombos. Was it enough for them to win the series? No, but my God, I still think that like that is so incredibly difficult to do that I to me I think TL should be more than happy with what they got out of him. Yes, he was mostly a one trick for like the success that came out of him was mostly from one champion. I don't care. He was able to play that champion and he's able to play it pretty darn well post laning phase. Considering I don't look at all at APA as like the culprit. You mentioned how obviously Core JJ is the culprit, and to a certain extent the other players as well. Jan got caught in game 5 when, and you got to give Ignar credit on the Alistar. Like there's other blame to go around. Um, to me, it's just if you're looking at APA as your first go-to, and I know most people aren't, but if you are, don't look somewhere else, please, because that is one of the hardest situations for any player to be put into, especially a rookie that was, I don't know, playing in academy really not long ago or Challengers League.
Yeah, I mean, I still would have him as the number two culprit behind Core JJ. Core JJ was still the number one, but APA was number two. And I think another thing that we kind of talked about a little bit last week, but I think was very obvious and apparent in this series was the champion pool issues. While I don't disagree that it is very difficult to play a champion that requires a lot of team coordination when it comes to getting your engages at the exact correct moment and kind of organizing your vision control to be able to flank and whatnot on a champion like Nico, there was no other champions for him to play. And I think that's just the simple reality of it. And there's a mosquito about to hit me in the face right here. Sorry. Um,
You're getting ganked by a mosquito.
you look at the pick ban off of every single game in the series, and NRG basically did exactly what I thought they should do from a draft and game plan perspective of ban the APA's two best champions in the Cassiopeia and the Ziggs, and Team Liquid was forced to ban the Jace every single game because they had no confidence that they either wanted to give Jace to Palafox or have APA play Jace. And the last thing was just leaving up the Azir in Game 5. And yeah, it's just like Palafox's comfort champion. So to give that to him in the fifth game, I thought was also kind of bad. But I think you could really see the champion pool issues right now. And unfortunately, his poor performance is part of that. I think in a situation where he just has a wider champion pool, I think we're not necessarily even talking about him as a problem because he might have the tools to actually play out a proper lane phase and, just go relatively even with Palafox. But like I said, he was losing every single lane down CS, allowing Palafox to help the team. And as you mentioned, I forget which game it was exactly, but that game where I think it was the game 1 on the Trist. It was game 1, yeah, where he's just able to surf around the entire map with contracts doing whatever they want.
And I know, like, if we're gonna cope for the other teams, I think we can cope for this one as well, right? He's got a month and a half ish, or maybe a month, or I don't remember when. I don't know when play-ins start. But he's got a month to gel more with his team. I know I said it a million times. I'm sorry, but he still is a fresh player in this league, fresh to this team. I think that another month being able to play with the same teammates will go a long way. I'm sorry. I see JNT.
Dude, it's
JNT is
like,
getting hard camped by this mosquito on his screen. I lost my train of thought. I was talking about APA. Anyway, oh yeah, he's got lots of time to gel still, lots of time to improve. And one of the most valuable things for a player is to be able to go to Worlds. So call me Cope Master, call me whatever you want. I still think there's nowhere to go but up for this guy. And so I think it's a really exciting side of things for him and for TL if they really are able to cement him as as a solid mid laner. Maybe they can actually get him a larger champion pool. Maybe they can actually have him improve and be able to compete against some world mid laners. Am I getting ahead of myself? Yeah, maybe. But you know what? Maybe he does prove us all wrong. This whole split has been people proving us wrong. Why not one more?
Yeah, and then just to quickly touch on the energy side of things for this series, you sort of outlined in the finals, it was a lot about the bot of energy and Dokla. Whereas, I mean, I touched on it already a little bit. Like, this was just a Palafox show. I mean, dude was playing so well this entire series. He won Player of the Series for that one, right?
I
Yeah,
couldn't tell you, but he was
yeah.
very good.
He played well the whole way through, and yeah,
We did talk a lot about energy, so I don't want to go in too long, but there's two things that I want to point out. I have been incredibly vocal about Dokla and giving over shutdowns. The only shutdowns that he gave over this whole weekend, by the way, were ones where like his team was getting Baron or something like that, where it was like a clear team fight win and it was worth. So that was an area where I was like, okay, Dokla, you're showing me something else. Just another reason why I shouldn't have doubted you. Um, Actually, okay, hang on. I'm getting a little jumbled in my thoughts. Okay, the second guy is Ignar. I thought the start of the series not very good. His recon not very impressive whatsoever. I thought that part of this is also that I happen to also be watching Delight on recon as well in the LCK finals. And let me tell you, you could see a difference in these recons. Is it fair to compare him to the LCK? Not really, but I expect more out of Ignar on the recon. As the series went on, he got much better, especially the game 5 Alistar was great. And so that was an area where it was like, finally, this is the Ignar we were promised a long, long time ago. And so that I thought was a huge improvement.
yeah. Actually, I kind of lied. Last thing, I kind of want to flip back to the TL side of things just quickly before we close it out, because I think obviously the game five and our performance is going to stick out in everybody's mind in terms of Summit, and obviously it followed the traditional train of Summit dying a lot in isolation. But I think, I think Summit had a really good series. Honestly, I think that I think I felt a little bit bad for him because I thought Summit was playing very, 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 very well and played well enough to deserve the win in this series. Because I thought that despite getting ganked a lot in the early parts of, I think it was games 1 and games 3, he died early on to a Dokla Contracts gank. He still always was able to put himself back into the game and had a couple solo kills, or maybe it was just the one on the Gwen. But I thought Summit did a really good job, and I don't want people's memory of Summit of the conclusion of this season to be only that game 5 NAR performance. And even at that, last thing that I'll say about this. Pyosik warded like a complete dog on a multiple occasions topside against hex flashing junglers. There was 2 games, I think it was the game 3 where Dokla or where Summit was playing Jax into Cassante, and it was game 5, which was the NAR game into Dokla's Rumble. Pyosik does not ward the river bush with his ward. He wards in the middle of the river. Yes, it gives you slightly more vision and gives you a slight, like 1 second earlier indication that the jungler is coming. But when the opposing jungler is playing a Hex Flash jungler, you need to ward the goddamn brush because it is the most. Everybody does it. When they're playing Hex Flash, they always Hex Flash over that little wall on the blue side of top lane to get into that bush. And there was 2 separate occasions where Pyosik did not ward in the bush, warded outside of the bush, and Summit got killed because of it. So
Now you've got a false sense of security,
yeah,
right? You
like
think that you're
so
safe and you're not.
yeah, it was in game 3 and I think it was in game 5 where Summit died early on to no fault of his own, but it was because of bad warding by Pyosik.
Yeah. Okay, let's do a quick I don't know, what do you want to call it? Split in review,
Yeah,
if you will.
obviously we are sending 3 plus potentially 4 teams to Worlds. They're not dead quite yet. Normally this is reserved for the time where we talk about the dead teams in the LCS, but the season's now over. The split is now over, and I feel like we would just do a little bit of a review of how summer went and what we thought of it. And first off, I think we'll lead with how exciting or interesting did you find the split overall? Because for me personally, I thought this was definitely one of the more exciting splits that we've had in the LCS for a long time. And I think usually people equate exciting splits with a battle for the number 1 spot in the league. I think normally people are always looking like, oh man, like it's such a close battle at the top. The split is so exciting, but I think it was actually the middle of the pack in the LCS, which was very exciting to watch. And I guess to a certain extent, Cloud9 they never necessarily separated themselves. So they were always within reach for other teams. We saw Golden Guardians and EG at one point in the splits tied with Cloud9 for first place. Cloud9 ultimately pulled away right at the end in the last week with the tiebreaker win over Golden Guardians. But the middle of the pack was super exciting to watch. It felt like on a week to week basis, we were always changing who we thought the number 3 team was, because that 3 to 7 range was super competitive with the likes of NRG, Team Liquid, Evil Geniuses, 100 Thieves, and you know, I was about to say FlyQuest when they were at that 3 and 6 point, but the part of the other reason why the split was so interesting is you had the juggernaut, which was FlyQuest, which everybody thought was going to be contending for Worlds after the failures of Spring bringing in Vulcan, and feel like despite them being a poor team and not winning a lot of games, yet they were still very exciting to watch.
I thought this split was fucking fantastic, and I know you're not going to be surprised by that whatsoever, JT, because Jinter knows Summer Split is my bread and butter. I love Summer Split, and I am really sad that it's done, but it is my favorite part of the year, I think. And I think this split absolutely delivered, for sure. You mentioned that pretty much everyone was interesting. Even Immortals was interesting because they were on like a huge loss streak, and it was like, how far is this loss streak going to go? Yeah, I loved the split. I thought it was great, and I could not be happier with the finish. I know. So this is really funny. People in the Discord were calling me out for because I broke up with NRG, and this is absolutely true, by the way. So for people that don't know, I broke up with NRG in the middle of the split because straight up, I did not believe in them. I did always cheer for them. That is, I definitely cheered for them, only unless they were playing Golden Guardians. But I did cheer for them. But I did not believe in them, and they proved me wrong. And I was never happier to be proven wrong because of how cool the storyline is. I'm a sucker for the underdog stories. This was one of them. Like, what a perfect way to end such a good season. God, I'm almost gushing here. I need to relax a little bit, but yeah, to me, I nothing but good things to say about this split. The only thing, I guess, which is not on the players or the teams whatsoever, is that it was a jam-packed season because of the walkout stuff and because it was in the middle of the week. But that has nothing to do with the teams, the players, the storylines whatsoever. That side of things was all terrific. And yeah, I super happy with how finals went, and I was just in pure shock with how it ended too. And that was great. It was like a dude. It was so main character esque, by the way. Like the Dokla Palafox contract side of things, especially, was so main character.
Yeah,
My God.
contracts had the plot armor for the playoffs this past split.
Yeah. And actually, I'll add on to this a little bit because I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago. We recently had a discussion about Palafox being like a tier 2 domino. Well, guess what? Now he's got a fucking championship. Like he's a way better tier 2 domino now than he was a week or two ago. In the sense that the domino being one of those first pieces to decide what happens the rest of the offseason. Because people are going to want to play with Palafox, for example, or with contracts now. Or how about a team that just won a championship? I think that's incredibly valuable. And I think there will be, if they do end up making roster moves, they will end up wanting to free agents rather will end up wanting to go to NRG, right?
Yeah, I think it's a kind of a good and a bad thing that NRG in a sense overperformed. It's obviously a good thing because all the players and the team and the staff, they're LCS champions, but to a certain extent, how well does NRG and I guess specifically Palafox continue to play before his price starts to get jacked up too much of what NRG might be willing to pay? Part of the reason why I say that is because, we did talk about Palafox being a potential tier 2 domino, but if he goes to Worlds and plays well, just saying, very hypothetical, and I don't even think this is going to happen. In a world where NRG gets out of groups and Palafox starts playing well, would not surprise me at all to see other teams then go after him and go after other players on NRG. And look at it from the NRG like organizationally perspective. This team continues to play well enough, then you're going to have to start re-signing your players, and likely that their value is going to be increasing from 1 week ago to potentially the end of Worlds. So
I normally have a shortcut where I can look at the contract database. Do you happen I don't have that on this setup and I'm too noob to
I'm pretty
find it.
sure they're all free agents.
Oh no.
Let me look.
Not like
LCS.
this.
I'll double check real quick.
Okay.
Just you need to stall for 30 seconds.
Yeah. Well, okay, while you're doing that, it's kind of a good point in the podcast to get to what somebody posted in our Discord. We have a channel that is topic suggestions, and someone made a fair suggestion, and we wanted to go over. Let me just open up that in the Discord here. Luxy says, regardless of how they do at Worlds, do you consider NRG's year a success and do you run back this core next year? Which I think is a good, that conversation is in line with, well, who is signed, right? Who is available?
Well, I have it now. I had them.
Go ahead.
I had them confused with EG because everyone on EG is like becoming free agent except for Jojo. He's 1 year, but Dokla is a free agent. FBI is a free agent, but they have contracts. Palafox signed for 1 more year and Ignar for 2 years. So, yeah, I had them slightly confused with EG, who most of their players are going free agent after the season.
Okay, so they do have some pieces locked down for at least a
I
little
mean,
bit.
in my opinion, they have the two most important lockdown for next year, which is contracts and Palafox.
Right. To Luxy's question, it's hard to say without Worlds happening yet.
I think it was a success regardless of how this finals weekend
100%.
played out. I think them making Worlds was already a big success. So
For sure.
it's now.
However, there is
now it's
two
just-
questions there, right? Because
Yeah.
one is it a success? No doubt. I think everyone will say absolute success. They won, and not only did they win, and not only is that already a success, regardless of who you are, but they did it as huge underdogs. But the second part is, do you make changes to this roster? As happy as I am for being proven wrong, especially when it comes to Dokla and Ignar, not exactly the most consistent players. And it's what's really difficult for GMs here is you have to look at, they were very up and down throughout the split, maybe even mostly down, honestly. But they showed up in the most important weekend. That's something that has to be heavily weighted when you make these kind of decisions. So this is where you do not envy a GM's position whatsoever as to whether you make moves or not.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I think it's obviously. I mean, I think Worlds will play a factor in that. Like I said, in a world where NRG goes out and they somehow make it out of groups, I think then that should be a pretty clear indication that to run the full roster back. I think
Keep it all.
I would hope that the player. I mean, NRG, the whole team and the players and the coaches seem like a very tight knit group. So I think any level of decent success at Worlds is gonna mean that this team sticks together. I think it feels bad to say considering he did play so well this finals weekend, and I feel like Dokla would be the one and only guy that I might make a change in. I look at. I mean, I'm kind of making a bit of a hypothetical here, but I look at somebody like Impact and what he could do for this NRG squad, and I feel like it becomes a lot easier for the team in general to drop potentially the inconsistency in the top side. But like I said, maybe Dokla is going to prove us all wrong at the World Championship. I don't think it'll happen. But, if you view NRG as a top team, and like I said, any success at the World Championship could potentially make this a desirable location for free agents, there's some proven LCS talent that shows up year in and year out that I think could serve NRG well.
Yeah, there is some other variables that need to be thrown into the conversation, such as who is available, can you afford somebody else, etc. So that's something that's important to consider. And I'm going to even throw one more variable in there, which feel free to meme the hell out of me for this. But they did mention in the post game interview after they won the championship the power of friendship, which I know is such a meme. What I am actually being serious about, though, is that it is really important that your players do get along and that there are good vibes within a team. That no matter how bad things get, you could be open and just honest with your teammates and be able to bounce back after awful performances, because NRG was a team that was extremely inconsistent. They were losing to trash teams this split, and they managed to bounce back. And so maybe you could credit some of the guys like Dokla or Ignar with being able to, I don't know, just provide a good team environment. How heavily that should be weighted versus how good of a player they are, that's a fair thing to bring up, right? Obviously, I think you should more heavily weight how good is the player before you heavily weight, how good of teammates are they. But that's something that can't be ignored. And I think that's a big part of their success as well. So I don't think it's as easy to just say Dokla's got to go because there's a better top laner, or Ignar's got to go because there's a better support. Clearly, this team gelled together really well, and that's something that the GM's going to have to consider too when they make, or if they decide to make moves.
Yeah, and if history says anything about this, you look at the CLG roster in season 6 and kind of their rise to the top. And in some ways was very similar to this NRG rise to the top, where you had a roster who many kind of dubbed as that they were greater than the sum of their parts. And I think that's kind of the similar situation to NRG right now. And that roster that I'm referring to, that 2016 roster, was carried over into 2017, despite the, if you want to call it, underperformance at Worlds, because they didn't make it out of groups, because there was a real possibility that CLG was going to make it out of groups that year if they hadn't lost to ANX because of what they didn't get out going 3-3, I think it was, even though they had beat Rocks Tigers. And despite the quote unquote failure at the World Championship, they still retained that roster into 2017. And I don't necessarily remember where they finished in 2017 spring. They were obviously still a good team. I know they beat Immortals, I think, in like a pretty banger game that year. But still, I would say if history dictates what the future could be, I would say that it's fairly likely that this NRG squad could continue into 2024, unless, like I said, some major inting happens at the World Championship or something.
Yeah, and Straight Puggin says, "What if Dokla pulls a licorice at international competition?" He says that in Twitch chat. Let me just say, if he starts solo killing against Eastern top laners, I am all aboard to keep Dokla. I don't want anybody else. I don't want this team to be touched if he starts styling people at Worlds. That is a very big if. Let's remind people of that. But if he starts solo killing some of those top laners, yeah, let's run him back, baby. Run him back for sure.
We won't get into the nitty gritty, but I guess we'll talk about it briefly here. What's your confidence level in terms of the four teams that we are potentially sending? Obviously, Golden Guardians will be playing the fourth seeded EU team for that extra spot, but
Oh boy.
I'm trying to think of. I would say that this is a pretty decent squad in terms of what we're sending to international competition, and people can make fun of me for saying this and bringing it up again, but I think the losses for both Cloud9 and Golden Guardians could be a bit of a kick in the ass in terms of making improvements for the start of Worlds, because I think everybody was convinced that that C9 and Golden Guardians were going to be the number 1 and 2 seeds going into the international tournament at the start of playoffs. I think I'd like you to find me the people who didn't think that Golden Guardians and Cloud9 were going to be seeds number 1 and 2. So for them to, get upset in both the lower bracket in Golden Guardians case and then Cloud9 in the finals, I think that'll just make them potentially be even better.
Sorry, I'm just replying to someone in Twitch chat. Um, where was I? I had something that I wanted to say. Uh, what were we talking about again? Refresh my memory.
That C9 and Golden Guardians losing could be a good thing
Oh
for
yes,
the
I know what I
strength
wanted
of
to say.
our teams going to Worlds.
Yeah, we wanted to talk about our strength going to Worlds. So this is the problem. I do feel like our ceiling is a little bit lower, and I will remind people that our ceiling hasn't exactly been high in the past, right? To me, call me crazy, but I do still think Cloud9 is our best team in the region, and they just lost in finals. So that makes me have less confidence. Where I do feel more confident is that our 2, 3, and 4 teams, I just think of them more highly than I did last year with 100 Thieves and EG. I'll remind people that last year EG had issues with Danny and they had to sub in Cowrie. How did we say his name?
Kaori, yeah.
Kaori? I can't, whatever. So that's where I feel more confident. It feels like we're sending more weapons. I just don't know if those weapons are, AK-47s or just little pistols.
Well, I mean, some
If that makes sense.
I think some people, might argue that Golden Guardians, especially them being in the play-in stage, could be a good thing for them, because I think we've seen a ton of teams talk about in the past how being able to play in the play-in tournament is actually a really good way to warm up for the actual tournament, both in terms of being comfortable on stage and international competition, and sort of just getting acclimated to damn mosquitoes all over me. Getting acclimated to the new patch and the world's meta and whatnot. So I think that in Golden Guardians case specifically, I think it's probably going to be a good thing that they're going to play that BO5 and play the play-in stage, because I think similar to Cloud9, there's a lot of lessons that they can take away from what NRG was able to sort of expose.
Yeah, it'll be such a nightmare if they don't win versus Europe, which obviously is possible, right? Like yeah, we meme Europe fourth seed because they got knocked out in in the past, but I don't think it's like completely obvious either way of who's going to win. And so that to me is like a kind of a coin flip. And you feel very different if Golden Guardians moves on versus not. Because even if you don't put Golden Guardians ahead of Cloud9 or ahead of NRG or TL, they still are a team that is definitely up there and can compete with those teams. And having one of those teams go to Worlds, I think really diminishes um, my thoughts about North America, or even the fact that I would say Golden Guardians is comparable to those teams. If that team loses to Europe fourth seed, then it's like, oh shit, maybe I shouldn't value Cloud9, TL, and NRG so highly. You know,
Hmm.
that's one of the issues that I have there. So I think we'll have a lot more of an idea what to feel once we figure out who Europe's fourth seed is, and after that series happens. But we're quite a bit away from that. So yeah. Overall, though, I guess overall I'm a little bit more optimistic than I am normally, if that gives an idea. Not by much, but a little bit more.
I think so as well.
Yeah, which is kind of good because last year felt like a disaster. Which, by the way, such a weird comparison, but like if the fourth seed thing existed last year, like TL's going to Worlds to fight against Europe's fourth seed and actually have a chance to still make Worlds, right? Like last year's pure disaster of like the TL super team with Bjerg and Hansama, etc. Like it's so unfortunate for them last year to now see a fourth seed get implemented to have another shot to go to Worlds. They're probably so mad, and I kind of would be too.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's a little bit different just because Golden Guardians is pretty much a good team up until their last two best of fives, whereas like Team Liquid, that roster was struggling the whole time. So
Fair,
while
okay,
while while
yeah,
I while I think you're correct about that, they're probably upset about that because they probably would have had the confidence to go be like, yeah, we're gonna go out and win this shit, and we are gonna make Worlds. But I think the situations are slightly different because everybody everybody thought that Golden Guardians was gonna be good.
yeah. It is interesting to look at the difference, though. Okay, what are we talking about next, JNT 250?
Well, I kind of wanted to. We talked a little bit about this last week in terms of there was the rumored sale of an LCS team. Many indications would be that that's Immortals potentially, but potentially looking
Or
to
EG, remember, it could be them as well.
or EG as well, yes. But looking at 2024, one individual that was appearing quite a lot throughout the festivities of the finals weekend, this past weekend, was Disguised Toast. And everybody knows about his involvement in the NACL. DSG, they won the NACL, right? Is that correct?
Yes.
So I think that was fairly recently. They 3-1. I forget who was the other team in the finals, but they ended up winning the NACL. And obviously, with Toast being very heavily involved in the finals weekend this past weekend, I think it's sort of an indication that Toast could potentially be in the LCS for 2024. And I think everybody would be excited at the prospect of that.
Maybe, right? Like, I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves here because there's a chance that he's just not, right? Like, one of the reasons why he first got a league team was that he saw Academy was falling apart and was like, hey, like, I care about the league scene, even though, like, yeah, he's mostly known for like Hearthstone, Among Us, etc. And it's not League isn't at the top of the list. He still has been very clear that he is a League fan. He used to watch League all the time, and he loves the game and he cares a lot about the players. That's one of the reasons why he got a team. With that said, I think that he does have more ambitions than just having an academy. I keep saying academy, a Challengers League team. And I do think that eventually he does want to join the LCS. The only issue is, and he's been very clear about this, he realizes that LCS teams are just losing money. And I'm sure he's not exactly gung ho about losing money himself. So I do think that it's going to require a significant drop in price of an LCS slot before that happens. Or an investor that really is just, well, maybe a little bit carefree with their money, perhaps. Like, it's still a long road ahead to see Toast getting into the LCS, in my opinion. Could I be wrong? Yeah. Do I hope I'm wrong? Oh, God, yeah. I really hope I'm wrong. I just think that's quite the leap at this point in time.
Well, let me paint you a little picture here.
Please do.
Because if you can remember, way back in the day of the 2015 Summer Finals at MSG, there was a certain figure that was, on the broadcast, and I would also argue is being pushed a little bit as a bit of a figurehead in terms of League of Legends and their potential involvement in owning a team. And if people don't know who I'm talking about Rick Fox. And he obviously was the team owner of Echo Fox, who then joined the LCS in 2016. So I think there is a couple comparisons you can draw from the 2015 MSG finals to the 2023 summer finals that we just had, with the involvement of Rick Fox on the broadcast and his sort of ambitions to own and join the LCS to disguise toasts, what we saw this past weekend. And I think another thing that points to that is the tournament that he announced while on the broadcast. I believe it was on the Saturday of the, what was it called? I have it written down here. The NA Legends Invitational, a tournament that's going to be hosted by, Disguised Toast slash DSG, which includes a 10K prize pool, with 4 teams, the captains being Sneaky, Afro Muscara, and Yasuo. But I think the most important thing, and part of the reason why I wanted to draw this comparison in the first place, is he's partnering with, his official listed partners and sponsors are a majority of the sponsors that are currently in the LCS right now. Your Samsung, your Govi, your Verizon, I think were the 3 that I recognize. And also his involvement with the NACL and the LCS, because all these teams are going to have one LCS player and one NACL player per team. And, even at the top of the banner that they had, like Riot Games, LCS, and NACL was all listed as an official partner. So I think Toast seems to be definitely a figure that the league is pushing. And I think there are comparisons you can draw to that of Rick Fox from 2015, 2016.
So you're making some really good points here. One in the plus column, as far as like him being more likely to join, you are right. The LCS does seem to want to get his face on camera. Part of that could just be, well, more people will watch if they know Toast will be on the broadcast. So it could just be that simple and it ends there. But it could also be that they realize, hey, you know what? One of the only ways to turn this ship around is to get people more invested in the teams by giving it to someone that people care about, like Toast. So maybe slots are still really expensive for the LCS. We don't know exactly what a price is, but maybe the LCS kind of looks at what they did with like Valorant, where they're actually paying teams to be in, and they see value in Toast and say, you know what? If Toast pays, X, we'll cover X amount for him to join the league, just because it's that valuable to the LCS. That could set a very dangerous precedent, and it could, maybe some of the other orgs are a little bit upset that he gets paid to join. I don't know. I have no idea. But that is a world where I could see that happening. I definitely could see that happening. So that's one thing. The LCS wanting him in the league could be a big part. Something else that I wanted to point out to, a really good question by T-Roy in chat says, why do we need a drop in price? We have no clue what current org slot valuations are. That is true.
I think it's pretty safe to say that the prices are dropping.
Yes. The rumor, and again, this was just a rumor, last year was that FlyQuest was sold for around 20 million. Do I think it's still that much? No. But for Toast to join on his own without an investor or without the help of the LCS to get him in there, I still think you would need a really, really significant drop from that 20 million for him to join. That's why I still say we need a drop in price. Let's say spots are back down to 10 million, which is what it was when franchising first started. That's still a lot of freaking money. And I don't think Toast is ready to drop 10 million on his own to join
13,
a league.
technically.
Why was that? Because was it an extra 3 million for something?
For if you were a non-LCS team.
Oh, that's right. Okay, thank you for pointing that. My point is that I don't think Toast is ready to fork up 10 million to join a league that has been losing money, right? Where all the teams are losing money. There needs to be something else there. Maybe the price would have to go down to like 5. I don't know. I'm throwing out numbers here that I don't have a full understanding of. That's why I say like you would need a drop in price still, because I have a hard time imagining that prices have dropped that significantly. However, we might hear rumors soon that point otherwise, that do say, yeah, prices are that low. That's something that is remained to be seen.
I'd be very interested to hear the mental gymnastics of the current teams who still believe that their spot is as valuable as they used to be. I'd be very interested to hear how they're framing that argument.
Yeah.
But
honestly, that's a fair, yeah.
Bit of for fun though, but we'll make some predictions here. Number one, do you think that DSG will be in LCS 2024? Just yes or no?
No.
I say yes.
Okay.
Because I think they need it, and I think Riot should be desperate.
JNT, I completely agree with you that they're desperate, and my God, I can't even state how much I hope you're right, and I hope that I'm wrong. I can't say it enough.
Number two, we already do have rumored knowledge of a team already selling their spot But how many
Yep.
teams do you think will sell their spot, and therefore how many new teams do you think will come into the league? Because I think I'm gonna go with two. I think there are people are talking about potential three. Those three being EG, TSM, and Immortals. If I had to guess though, I think it'll just be TSM and Immortals.
Yeah, that's tough.
Could even be four. Who knows? There was talk
It's
about
tough.
100 Thieves as well. There was
So
something
here's
about
why
that.
I'm not completely sold on the Immortal side of things is because they've already been sticking around in the league for so long without doing anything with their spot anyways. What's another year, right? Especially if they're, let's say rumors get out that Toast is looking to join, or Mr. Beast, or any influencer that makes the league more interesting already. Do you want to now get rid of your team where the league has a good chance of being way more popular because these teams have influencers backing them? Right? Like maybe your spot becomes more valuable if now a Toast and a mogul whatever joins, right? Maybe you want to be in the league at that point. So my point is saying that if Immortals is held out this long and then rumors happen that other influencers are going to join, maybe they decide what the hell, maybe we stick around just a little bit longer. And as somebody else is pointing out in the chat, which we want to get to, well, we were going to get to a little bit later, but I guess we'll just get to it now. The combination rumor of the LLA joining could make things way more interesting, right? Or CB LOL or something like that, right? Maybe there's a combination of different regions that makes the league way more interesting.
Yeah,
And
I
maybe
want
you
to.
want to not leave for that reason, right? Like there's other things that could make teams like Immortals or any org for that matter want to stay.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. I think it was maybe three episodes ago, maybe four, where we sort of were talking about the idea of what could the LCS look like if they partnered with CBLL and did something similar to the VCT system of five NA teams and five Brazilian teams competing in what they call it the VCT Americas.
You know,
It's definitely an interesting conversation. And in terms of what the future of the LCS looks like, I would argue that is the direction that they're probably going. I don't think that's going to be as soon as next year, but I would have to think, 2025, 2026 type of timeline for that.
it So it's really difficult to predict because we have no information, right? We have, or let's say, very little information to go off of. What does seem pretty certain is that the LCS is clearly going in a direction that Riot doesn't like, that the teams don't like. I expect a lot of changes. What those changes are, I can't even begin to know, but I do expect there to be some changes. Maybe that could be the location thing, like we talked about earlier. Maybe they do get out of LA. That is also a big if, but if they do, that's going to change a lot. And if influencers do decide they want to get in, guess what? Maybe other influencers decide they want to get in, right? If there's a merger between leagues, that shakes up a lot. They're probably trying to have discussions about every possibility, every possible change, and that's going to definitely change the way that these org owners or investors or whatever look at how valuable their spots are and how much they want to stay or join or leave or etc.
Well, we got some quick news. We'll continue on with our sort of world's update as teams continue to qualify for the World Championship and we get some more info in terms of who will be seated where. Obviously, the LCS, the teams are still the same, but we now know the order of NRG 1, C9 2, TL3, Golden Guardians 4. Over in the LEC, both G2 and Mad Lions have now qualified for the World Championship. They'll at least be the third seed after G2 beat BDS and Mad Lion beat XL. In the LCK, we had the LCK Finals just prior to the LCS Finals with Genji taking down T1 3-0. Genji will be the number 1 seed and T1 will be the number 2 seed. I think based on the LCK Finals, I think it's safe to say that we can dub Genji as one of the tournament favorites. Obviously, I think the other
Yes.
two are probably JDG and BLG due to their MSI performances and the landscape of the LPL where they were the clear number 1, number 2 teams the entire way. So as an early, not that we're going to get into a discussion about this, but as the early favorites of the World Championship, I would have to say it's the three of Genji, BLG, and JDG.
Yeah. And for people that might be like, why are you leaving T1 off that list? A part of it is that
You
they got
watch the
trio
finals,
clapped.
watch the spring finals, and watch the summer finals in the LCK. Genji kind of just annihilated them.
Well, and another part to remind people is that T1 did falter a lot. Yes, Faker was having wrist issues, but who's to say those issues don't come back, right? That's something that I think that's a significant thing to consider when putting a team as a favorite for the tournament. We saw that without him, they were pure garbage. So if those issues do come back, not only are they no longer a favorite, they're probably one of the underdogs at that point. So there's a lot of things that could keep T1 out of that discussion. I think that's probably why we don't have them as a tournament favorite. Not at the moment. Maybe groups. I guess it's not even group stage anymore. Let's just say the early
I
goings
think
of the
it's still
tournament could.
called group stage, but it's the Swiss format.
Yeah, the early goings, we'll call it, of the tournament will definitely influence how we think of teams. And maybe at that point, if we see T1 absolutely popping off and styling against other good Eastern teams, maybe we change our minds at that point. I think we need to see it first before we put them as a tournament favorite.
Mm.
And then I don't think Europe I mean, we definitely know the LCS hasn't been relevant enough to be a tournament favorite in God knows how long. And I think Europe pretty much follows suit with that.
I didn't even think
Um,
we needed to even ask the question. I thought it was everyone
no,
knew the
but
answer.
people do still throw G2 in there just because they did, well, they had a couple of good years. They went to finals and then they went to semis a couple of other years. Um, but I just need to point out that I don't think that the current state of G2 is comparable to those rosters. But I've been proven wrong before. God knows I was wrong about NRG this split, and so maybe I'm wrong about G2 as well.
Well, to shift over to some of the emerging regions or wildcard regions or whatever you want to call them, no surprise, DFM representing the LJL once again.
They're
They won their
back,
summer
baby.
split. Although, I mean, people know the name DFM. I know we talked about there was a bit of drama with that team in the middle of the split where their top laner Toll 2 had to leave the team, and there was stories about abuse from management and whatnot. So for anybody the one name that people should know on DFM is Udapon, who's their AD carry, who's been there since their existence. He's actually their top laner now. I just checked out today. Like I just went to go see like what the LGL finals was because I wanted to see if the second place team was Reaper's team, but it wasn't. They were third. But I noticed looking at the team, like Udapon is now playing top lane, and now they have a new bot laner, which was kind of interesting, I thought. And then
They need
last up,
Evi back.
yeah, I guess. And then last up,
Dude,
the
what?
LC.
Hold on a second, though, because I need to know if this is crazy to say. That team feels completely different without him. Is it just me? Like, I need the thumbs up. Is that
Yeah.
weird to say?
No, it's not weird to say. I think he was definitely a big personality.
Yeah. Sorry, carry on.
Well, there's last up the LCO. They are not going to be able to send any representation to the World Championship. If people remember, they had I don't even know if you'd call it a partnership, but they had a bit of an agreement with the PCS where players in the LCO could declare PCS residency if they wanted to join a PCS team. And also the number 1 and 2 LCO teams were sent over to the PCS to face the 3rd and 4th seeded PCS teams for a chance to qualify as either one of the top 2 seeds from the PCS. Both of those teams lost in various playoff series, so no OS. The 2 PCS slots at the World Championship will be filled by PCS teams.
I'm torn with what to think about this because first of all, this is really interesting. The fact that they can't go because they didn't qualify, but I'm torn because when they do go, they get spanked, right? However, I do kind of feel bad for a region not having a representative at Worlds, even if they are going to get just hard clapped.
I mean, they didn't have one
So
last year either.
I'm a little bit torn with how to feel. Didn't they have one last year? They didn't?
No.
Was it MSI that I was thinking of?
I don't know what you were thinking of, but it wasn't last year because there wasn't an OS team there.
Oh. Regardless, I still don't know how to feel about it because I think that sucks not having a representative there.
I'll double check just to make sure, but yeah, there was. Oh wait, it does say one team actually. Who's the team?
Is it Legacy? Was it somebody else?
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, they went 0-5 and got insta-dicked on.
Well,
That's why I
yeah.
didn't even remember them.
Well, yeah, but the point, well, that's pretty much what I was saying. Yeah, they get spanked every time. But I'm trying to think
That's how forgettable OS is. I couldn't
about
even
if that
remember that
was.
they were at the World Championship last year. And we were at that shit.
I know this isn't a completely fair comparison, but let's use North America because we are NA fans. NA goes every year. We get spanked every year.
But
But do I want
we
my
win
teams to
games
go?
at least.
Yeah. I understand. That's why I say it's not a totally fair comparison, but I still want my teams to go. And so that's where I feel a little bit bad. Now they still could have qualified, but they just weren't good enough. And this kind of reminds me of Race, former Immortals AD carry. He made a tweet. I don't even know if it was before they got knocked out from qualifying for Worlds. I don't know if it was before or after, but he made a tweet basically saying like, I'm paraphrasing here, basically saying I don't even know what to do with this region anymore because solo queue sucks and basically all the stuff that you hear about NA, but you know that it's way worse for OS. And it got me thinking like the path to pro for an OS player was already incredibly difficult. Like, yeah, you can make it as an LCO player, but like to actually be able to um, go to Worlds now feels so impossible. Because yes, the solo queue is incredibly bad because there's such a lower player base. You don't really get to practice against any good teams. It's like it's the same problems we have here in North America, which is why I think I'm so sympathetic to the problem. Except it's just like I don't know, multiply it by like 10. Their players have no way. Like, how do they make it to pro outside of the LCO?
Just have to be good enough, I guess.
But how do you get good enough anymore when you can't practice against good play? Like all the good players, like Fudge, for example, like all the FBI, the good players from that region have left, so you
Well,
can't
yeah,
practice against those players anymore.
but new players will end up replacing them. Like new players will rise to the top.
I guess
You saw
it
that.
just
Well,
feels
I
like
guess
it's so difficult.
here's what I would say to that. If we want to draw, another Valorant comparison, when
Hmm.
in the early days of Valorant, all the NA teams or the majority of them were all ex Counter Strike players,
Yeah,
and if that was the norm for about 6 months to 1 year before we saw a lot of pure Valorant guys come up, and now it's the majority of the players that are competing now in the VCT. Just from what I know in my very limited knowledge, the majority of them are guys who came up from Valorant. So I think you're kind of going to be in a similar situation to OS, where yes, a lot of the top tier talent left in the off season of 2020 to 2021, where NA and OS had that agreement where similar to what they did with the PCS this past off season, where you could declare residency to NA and then move to NA to get picked up by an LCS or a challenger team, and then your spot would not count as an import slot. And I think because all of that talent got uprooted, that it's probably going to take another 3-4 years for new talent to develop, and for the talent to reach to the level where they maybe can go compete with the PCS for world slots. So I
yeah.
just think it's when you uprooted all the major talent not even a year and a half ago, or I guess it would be almost 2 years now. It's not the insta fix is not going to show up. Like you're going to have to just wait for OS players to get good and wait for some more talent to rise to the top.
Yeah, I guess just one of the things that I'm thinking about that's different now is because North America got rid of the Challengers League, right? Only 3 teams have it. And yes, there are other orgs still that have some players. There's still such a smaller chance that you can be picked up by a North American org or just go to another region, even because all the European teams have like their own language. Like there's like French teams and Spanish teams. So, like, even then, there's already language barriers. The situation that like Fudge had where he just went to Cloud9 Academy and got better, that doesn't exactly exist anymore, right? It's just so much more difficult for those players. It's still possible. It's just so much more difficult, and I feel bad for the region because I know that if North America was in the exact same situation, I'd be devastated. That's all. It just yeah, sucks.
Yeah, it's kind of unfortunate, but like I said, I can't imagine that they'll be internationally like they won't have any international representation for another year or two. It's just going to take more time for the scene to redevelop again.
Yeah, which is rough. But anyways, shout out to the OS fans. It's
Uh,
rough.
yeah. Next up, kind of similar to what we were talking about with the potential combination of the LCS plus CBL and whatnot. Carlos Tunes, I'm hoping that I'm pronouncing that last name correctly, Riot's head of esports in Brazil, is now going to lead the entire LoL ecosystem in the Americas. And this has kind of been something that we've been bringing up every about month or so, is that the LCS has no commissioner, and they announced that Chris Greeley was no longer, or they announced after the departure of Chris Greeley and the announcement that Jackie Felling was going to be the commissioner, with her resignation, which I think was in November or December of last year, we've constantly been bringing up the question of, well, who's going on? Like, what's going on? Like, who's going to be the commissioner of the LCS? And I think we kind of have our answer here. It's going to be this Carlos Tunis guy.
Yeah, so my instinct, mind you, I know very little about it, but my instinct is like, hey, at least we got someone. We went the whole year, like there was a whole walkout and there was no one to point the finger at. You know what I mean? Like, what the hell? We had a whole walkout and there's no commissioner around during, like, that's one of like the worst. That would be one of the best times to have a commissioner, honestly. And we didn't have one. Um, but the part that makes me feel a little bit good about it is like there's been success in regions outside of North America. The
I think everybody is
Brazil has
saying
been
that
great.
this is going to be a good thing for the LCS because of how, the CBLOL has kind of exploded over the last 2 years, especially in terms of viewership. I think we talked about it midway through the summer split, where CBLOL average viewership was getting more viewers than LCS viewership, and that's a fact.
Yeah, and my initial thoughts are, I can't wait to see what this guy brings over from his knowledge of growing the CB and if he comes over to looking at North America and at the North American product and what they have slated for improvements, and he looks at it and goes, "This is garbage. I got something better." That I'm curious to see if that happens, and that's what we're praying for. I mean, LCS fans, we're pretty desperate. So I mean, that's what we're praying for in this scenario, right? Is that he has the answers that the LCS and LCS fans and teams, etc., that they need.
And now, last up, not necessarily um, competitive gameplay related, but something that got the entire community up in arms over this past week was the announcement of the Gacha systems coming to League of Legends, very akin to what's been going on in TFT over the last 4 months with this Dark Cosmic Erasure Jin skin, which is a $200 chroma, basically, has no special animations, has no special anything. It's literally just a $200 chroma. It's probably the most dog shit thing I've seen in a while. There was some comparison that somebody did on Reddit where there was a chroma for like Dark Cosmic Lysandra, which actually looks better than the $200 chroma of the same skin line. It's hilarious.
It sounds like a terrible idea. Um, it also is terrible timing because right now everyone is talking about Baldur's Gate, and one of the best things about it, why people are so happy about it, is you buy the game, you get the game, you don't got to worry about all the microtransactions and shit like that. And at the same time, Riot comes along
Well, League's a free
and
game.
pisses. Pardon me.
Well, League's a free game.
Yes, it is. It is, but it's just it goes exactly against what people say they want with all the mini microtransactions. Like people are so happy with Baldur's Gate because you buy the game and you get it, and you don't have to put $200 towards Gacha system. It just feels like the timing is pretty rough.
Yeah,
You know?
there was a huge amount of backlash on both Reddit and Twitter from almost the entire community about the philosophy that Riot was following and going by, and sort of their announcement of this, and then Riot Bright Moon seemingly defending Riot's decision to not change the system or change the skin at all whatsoever. But they're kind of just in a lose-lose situation here with Riot. I think basically with the Riot Bright Moon announcement of him basically saying that no, we're not going to do any changes, it just seems like it's Riot biting the bullet here, and that this one is going to go through as planned, but maybe there's going to be changes in the future. Obviously, he didn't say that there was any indication that there could be changes in the future, but I'm just assuming that they kind of were just like, this was their way of saying, oh yeah, we fucked up.
From a PR side of things, I wonder if it probably would have been better for them to just not say anything at all.
Probably. I mean, probably.
Don't get me wrong, I do prefer that Riot comes out and acknowledges what the community is saying, and they have done a good job with their updates in the middle of the season, saying like, "Oh, here's what we're working on, here's where we failed you guys, and here's what we want to work on." To I appreciate them being communicative with the player base, but as far as the PR side of things, it just doesn't seem like the best route is to go, "Yes, we hear you, and we're not going to change anything."
And I guess for the people that maybe aren't as familiar with the situation, I don't want it to sound like people are upset about the fact that the skin costs $200 and whatnot, because they are, it's a very comparable system to what's going on with in TFT. And while people necessarily don't like that system, it's a system that works. But the problem that people have with it in League is the lack of content from Riot in general when it comes to League of Legends over the past year. In terms of new champions released is down, which I think is a good thing. I don't know why people are upset about there being less champions. Less champions per year is a good thing, but less skins, or less like sorry, less new skins, sorry, I should say. They're kind of just recycling skin lines at this point. Then there's also the lack of VGUs. There's the whole Skarner thing. There's a lack of the cinematic at the beginning of the year, and the fact that this sort of this big addition that they were making into the game, this like super exclusive prestige, prestige type of skin, is just like it's so no, like, what's the word I'm looking for? It has no effort put into it. It's literally a chroma. Like, I think the conversation around this would be a lot different if it was its own skin that was really dope with cool animations and everything. Because I don't think people would have a problem with that at all. The fact that it's literally a chroma is the thing that people are upset about with.
Well, and I think one of the things that has people worried is that the only way to make this stop is to have the community not pay for it. Don't buy it, forehead.
And
The
everyone
problem with
says that, but they don't follow that.
Exactly. The problem with that is that you're still going to have your whales out there that have a shit ton of money and buy absolutely everything and ruin it for everybody else. That's where the frustration comes from, because there will be a lot of people that are out there that are like, I'm not going to pay for this, and you could try to get me to gotcha, but you're not going to get me. But they get a bunch of other people, and then they get frustrated because the community isn't acting in the way that they would like. That's where the frustration comes from, and I completely understand that. I don't have a solution. I
Yeah.
really don't. Riot's going to try to make money. I can't blame them for that. Do I wish they would try to make money in better ways? Yeah, I do.
Dude,
But
the
god
thing the
damn, we
thing
live
that
we live in a society where money wins all the fucking time.
dude, map skins. Everyone and their mom says that they would pay for map skins, myself included. That is like the freest money in the world, I think, in League of Legends. Like, just make map skins.
Oh, also, Vampire says something that I think a lot of people are thinking, worth repeating here. He says, personally, would rather pay a thing rather than pray that I hit. Yep. The pray that
Yep.
you hit gets a little frustrating. Yeah. So I second that notion.
That's it.
And yeah, map skins do sound pretty cool, by the way. I wasn't even thinking about that. That sounds cool.
That's just the one that I see all the time. And I mean, I've said it myself, and I would 100% pay for a map skin.
Before we close out the show, Jinter, should we talk a little bit about our experience at this summer, whatever?
Oh, yeah. We were,
We did go to the meet and greets. Do we have a bean soup award to give away, Jinter?
yeah, Cloud9 was doing a Meteos meet and greet on the Sunday, but it was done at 1:15, basically, or something. I don't know when it
the
started and when it ended, but I don't know. It's kind of limp.
the outdoor what are you, the fan fest? Fan
Fan
fest was
fest, yeah.
supposed to end at like 3, and the meet and greet was done at like 1 o'clock. So like way before it was over.
Mhm.
We're standing like, I don't know, 50 feet away from Meteos. We could see him sitting there, and then I don't know, he just dipped, and that kind of sucked. But overall, I didn't think the Fan Fest was too bad. Definitely better than the one in 2019 in Detroit.
Yeah,
The one in
definitely.
2019 was kind of shit.
Well, I think part of the reason that made the one this year a lot better than the one that we had went to in 2019 was there was so much more space. I remember in the 2019 one, it was such a small area that they had all the 10 team and sponsorship booths set up to where like you were had to like move shoulder to shoulder with people and the lines were like so clustered. Obviously, that was kind of pre-COVID as well, so maybe they didn't take all of that into consideration, but I think it was definitely there was so much space and there was a lot of people on the Sunday. Like compared the Saturday to the Sunday of all the people at the fan fest, like it was packed in Sunday or on Sunday.
Yeah. Yeah. No, but overall, I think they did a pretty good job. We didn't get to all the booths. We didn't get to all of them. So I'm sure like the TL one was probably really good. There was a
But the
really long line for
one
that.
that we did get to, the best booth,
I
the
get let me get my
Dignitas
toy.
booth. Yeah, dude, shout out the Dignitas booth. The Dignitas booth was good. It was a well-run system. They got people in there going
Got all my
quickly.
stuff here.
Yeah, they were giving out some pretty sick free stuff. Their meet and greet with their players went until 2 o'clock, and honestly went even a little bit after 2 o'clock. I noticed, and also shout out to Jensen who signed my jersey, even though the team actually said that they couldn't do any more signings, so they were trying to get through everybody. He still signed our jerseys for us, so let's go.
Yep. Yep. Got a picture with the Danish duo plus Rich. That was
Hmm.
pretty cool. Big shout out to all the players. We didn't get to take pictures with all of them, but shout out to all the players that were there that probably didn't want to be there. Like I put myself in like Prince's shoes, for example. Like was a huge player in LCK, comes over to North America, has a great spring, and then just falls off a cliff all of a sudden. And then you miss playoffs, and now you got to take pictures and pretend like everything's cool. Where he's probably infuriated with how the split went, but he still went out there, took pictures. So shout out to all the players that did that: Vulcan, Prince, Vikla. Who else was there? We said Jensen, Santorin, and
Jojo,
Rich.
Revenge,
Jojo, Revenge were doing a lot of stuff. There was a lot of players.
Vulcan.
So shout out to all the
Did you
players
say
that did
Vulcan?
that. Yeah, I did. I did.
Um, didn't see no 100 Thieves players, no
Dude, that booth
C9.
sucked. 100
Yeah,
Thieves
100
booth was,
Thieves was the
what the
worst
hell was
booth.
that?
Oh, there was TSM had Haunter, Turtle, and Chime.
Yep.
Um,
We didn't get to the TSM booth, but in 2019 their booth did nothing.
yeah,
And
the TSM booth from 2019 was the 100 Thieves booth this year. Dude, the 100
yeah.
Thieves there was not a single person there on both days. I saw not a single person. And honestly, I think part of that was because all they had there was just like merch sales. Like they had nothing. There was no meet and greet with any players. There was no sort of free prizes that they were giving away. There was nothing. And I think you could really tell which of the teams put a lot of effort into their booths. Obviously, I think when you look at the Cloud9 TSM and the Team Liquid one, all three of those were really good because they both had a lot of merch, a very diverse range of merch, and they also had meet and greets going on for a majority of the time that they were there. Those are the main. That was kind of the area that we were in the most part. So, and the Dig one as well, and the NRG one was
Big.
also good. They had on the Sunday they had PCs set up for people to do stuff. I have no idea what they were doing, but it seemed like NRG was doing some sort of a thing where maybe they were doing some giveaways and whatnot. But yeah,
I never
you
thought that
could
I
you
would
could
be
really tell which teams put more effort in.
Yeah, I never thought that I would be impressed with Dignitas at anything. No offense to Dig.
Yeah,
But like,
kind of
yeah,
agree.
theirs was great. I don't know, I took my headphones out. Did you tell people like what they were doing for like their little game or whatever?
No, I didn't say the game, but you
So
were.
they gave you a little plushy Baron, and you were supposed to throw it in like it was like a carnival game, and there was like uh seven, no, one, two, three, four, yeah, 7 holes or something like that set up, kind of like bowling. Maybe it was 10, I don't know.
I was
And
gonna say it
basically,
was 10. Your lack of bowling was.
okay, yeah, I don't. Anyways, and you needed to throw the little Baron. It was the Baron throw, right? Dignitas, haha. And you throw the little Baron plushie if you hit it in the right hole, which is the smite one. So if you secure the Baron with the smite, it was pretty clever. You won a little diggy, and this made me way more happy than it probably should have. And then, did you tell people that we were on? We also went on like the stage or whatever
Dude,
for
man,
Mastercard.
I'm a humble guy, man. Like, relax.
The catching up with double lift guy, the one that's not Mark Z. We scammed him into thinking that we both have a Mastercard. I guess you actually have
Whoa,
a
whoa,
Mastercard.
whoa. Dude, I have a MasterCard. I'm a MasterCard holder. If anybody is watching this from the LCS and is doubting my lack of MasterCard, I have it.
I may have scammed them into thinking I have a Mastercard. And anyways, we went on stage or whatever for I don't know what, I guess to show off the Mastercard stuff. And for that, they gave us a T-shirt and a sweater, but the sweater didn't fit me. I gave that away. But then they also gave us Timo Shroom. I got a Ziggs bomb. People that know me know that this is way more important to me than it should ever be. All this to say, it was a fucking fun weekend, I guess, of games and stuff to do. So big shout out to the LCS. Big shout out to all the teams that did all the cool booth stuff. And big shout out to the players that took pictures with fans and etc. That was really, really cool.
Yep.
Okay, I think we should close out the episode now. We had fun. Uh, should we even guesstimate when our next episode is, Jinter?
Yeah, honestly, I have legitimately no idea when our next episode is going to be. I think it's pretty safe to say there's going to be no episode next week. The World Championship does not start. Let me just double check the start and end the start date here. But
We
Worlds
don't
doesn't
want to
start
be
until October the 10th. So I would assume that we would probably have episodes running the 2 weeks before that to sort of do a little bit of a preview in terms of what to expect from the new format and all the various teams. But like I said, it kind of just depends on the schedule in terms of when things are happening and what's happening and any potential news that comes out. I know that the Asia games are going to be happening in September, so who knows? Maybe we'll maybe we'll make an episode about that, just doing maybe a bit of coverage, but I would say it's pure guesswork at this point in terms of when our next episode's going to be.
Yeah, we're stuck in between wanting to get you guys the content because, as you guys have told us many, many times, you want the content for the Mondays. We hear you, but we're stuck in between that and also not wanting to waste everyone's time and talk about nonsense. So, we're going to do our best to get you guys episodes and to have interesting things to talk about. And if not, well, we apologize, but we'll try to do as many episodes as we can. Another last reminder, I know I've said a couple times, but remember to subscribe so that when we do start doing episodes again, hopefully that's soon rather than later, but when we do start doing them again, you guys get them recommended in your feed. Even hit the bell if you want to. I don't care. That's up to you. Remember, like, comment. It helps us tremendously. Big shout out to everyone that has been involved in just even the discussions in the Discord, doing all that stuff for us, supporting us. We can't even tell you guys how awesome this split in particular has been. We're trying to reach 500 subs. We'll hopefully get there soon. I don't know when we're going to get there, but the 500 subs is when we could start to monetize. And so even if that's not a lot, every little bit helps us. So thanks for all the support, and we'll continue to give you guys the best content we can. Anything else, J and T?
No, I mean,
Okay,
it
we'll
was
see
a
you
good summer
guys when we
split.
see yous. Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll see you guys when we see yous. This has been episode 138 of the Clown Fiesta podcast. Take care.